part of the reason for starting a business is the exit. And the exit is, in some cases, it varies. We all have different reasons and different ways of doing it. But Dennis, I hear all the time about that dream unicorn exit about having to, just get billions of dollars and, we're going to do all this stuff. And people don't really know, what it looks like and what the truth is about those exits.
And most of the time they're wrong is the real
Mhm.
problem. So, and there, everyone's always asking, what's that secret sauce? Or when do I
Yeah.
jump? Or
Hmm.
because it's your baby. And so it's also hard to jump.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like, what is that secret sauce that we're looking for if you're really in that mode to think about selling?
Hmm. By the way, Dennis, just so people might know, I'm outdoors. I'm getting a little blinded by the sun here right now. And you are all set up in your office now too,
If
as
you
well.
notice my background, it's actually clean and organized. And
Hmm.
after moving from Nashville down to Atlanta, we
Yeah,
finally got things settled up and things are back to normal.
yeah. Working from home, we get the ability to pivot. You get to see my Colorado flag here, and you know, along those lines of working from home and getting our businesses to that right next level. Today's guest, I think, is pretty amazing. He's an interesting guy. The fact that he's done this exact same thing that we all dream of. We're talking about, having an exit in the hundreds of millions of dollars, being able to really have a lot of interesting stories to tell, the perspective from a leadership and founder. Gerry Gadoury, who is now the founder and owner of Redbeard Solutions, he shares with us a lot of very interesting things. And I'm not going to, Gerry kind of explains it in the podcast, but I'm not going to do justice in terms of all the exits he's done and what his background is. But I think this is a really interesting podcast, and I definitely learned a lot from Gerry, and I think you'll understand why he's had the success he's had. So let's
Yeah,
give it a
take a
listen.
listen. Take a
Yeah.
listen.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
So Dennis, we have always wanted to, as a business owner, we have certain dreams and certain things that we want to achieve. We all have our own individual independent goals, but without a doubt, with my fellow entrepreneurs and the people that I talk to in our space, one of the things that we talk about is, God, that exit. How am I going to get to that exit? Whether it be, you know, PE buying me out or a large company in my space. I want Meta or Microsoft to buy me out. Those are some things that really are kind of the stuff that dreams are made of, right? And I don't know about you, but I want to know the secret sauce. What's the magic bullet for making that happen?
I would agree. I hear that a lot of, oh, I'm going to sell my company and make a fortune.
Hmm.
But they need to know what is that secret sauce?
Yeah. So we have an expert on today who's going to give us those secret sauces, right? They let us know exactly how it's all done. But Gerry, thank you so much for showing up today and being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about in the intro, a little bit about your background, but maybe can you make sure we didn't miss anything. Tell us a little bit about kind of your experience as an entrepreneur. I think that's always kind of a good place to start. It's a pretty, it's a pretty impressive background that you've got there. So maybe share a little bit so I don't miss anything.
Sure. So going all the way back, I'm a former Marine sergeant. I did signals intelligence in the Marine Corps. That path led me to technology, and technology, surprising nobody, led me to the startup world. I've worked predominantly in the technology services and the intelligence services space. Exited founder, one of my companies, we sold. I was part of the leadership team of a company called Apicero, which was a MuleSoft consulting firm that we built in under 5 years to 2,500 employees, 9 offices in 3 countries, and we ultimately sold to NTT Data for a lot of money, about $250 million. And we learned so much from that. And it's what I learned from that led me to the company I founded now called Redbeard Solutions. But that exit was an incredible experience.
Yeah. So, in terms of like where that those businesses lied and what you did, kind of, what is that? What were those spaces? Or I don't know if maybe they are completely different businesses, but what kind of things did you guys do?
Yeah, so great question. So let me take one step back. When I left the Marines, I moved into technical recruiting.
Hmm.
I went from technical recruiter to salesperson, branch manager, regional manager. I ran the New England territory for Kelly IT, which in those days was a $6 billion piece of business. From that, I started teaching sales and recruiter training. And then ultimately that grew into leadership training as I discovered that in most technology services companies, the challenges they faced were leadership challenges. As a matter of fact, I'll say with some confidence, 100% of the problems they faced were ultimately leadership challenges. No organization in the over 100 that I've worked with over the years ever grows past the level of its leader.
Hmm.
And in that transition to teaching this stuff, I started taking long-term contracts as an executive in technology services companies, custom software development shops, ultimately like Apicero, MuleSoft Consultancy. And that's, where Apicero happened. So as far as types of companies, it really, again, technology staffing firms, custom software development. I even helped move an Indian investment firm to the United States, investment banking company. That was an incredible experience. The connection being they worked exclusively in technology services for a niche. So I had a lot of connections that helped them. So from a background perspective, I've really bounced around technology services the most. I have done some technology product companies as well. And what we're going to talk about really applies, I think, pretty broadly, but certainly specifically to technology services.
I was gonna say, I mean, the where you're gonna go here soon, this applies not only to tech, but it applies to everything. Because the key thing in technology, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it's really not the product they have, it's about the people that make up that organization. That's the value in many of these tech companies because there's no I mean, they all have different technologies and things, but most of them can do similar or like things, and it's really about the people and do you trust them?
100%. In technology services specifically, it's the team that you're selling. You're only as good as the value your team brings to your clients. So ultimately, if you're only able to attract and lead an average team, guess what your company is?
Mm.
An average in business is a lot of words to say going out of business. So it's critical.
So, knowing that in technology and it applies to production, retail sales, all of those things. I mean, a lot of times they have products that are unique or different, but again, it still comes down to the people. I know this past week I had to return something to Home Depot and they've changed their customer service. It's actually very pleasant and it makes you feel good. And so even before I ask, she was like, "Hey, we'll just refund the whole thing and we'll reorder it for you and we'll give you, X% off." And it's like, okay, something's changed at Home Depot that's not how it used to be. And it's like they're putting customers first. It's like, I'll go to Home Depot now before I'll go to Lowe's because they both have the same products, but it's about the people and the experience of what you get when you go in there.
What a
Hmm.
great example. Customer service is the other side of the sales equation. And if you do business with the same customer for long enough, there's going to be a mistake. There's going to be something that causes friction. That's unavoidable. But what tells a great company from a good one is how they deal with that friction and what they do to make it right. So couldn't agree more. That's a great example.
Yeah. I mean, because if you're buying something and you think everything's gonna be 100% you're correctly incorrect, there's gotta be problems. I mean, there's supply chain, there's all these other things. One of my friends up north of us, he have a paint company, and you hit on the head. His part of their mission says, "We will have problems, but we guarantee that we will fix them." And it's like, okay, you admit that, okay, there's gonna be times where things don't go right, but you're on it and you're gonna make it right, and no matter what, it's gonna turn out correctly for you.
And I'll take that one step further, especially in an AI age, which we find ourselves at the very beginnings of now. All of business is about personal relationships. People like
Mm.
to think that business is made with logical decisions. Not in my experience. People make emotional people make emotional decisions and then validate them with logic. So we know this from our personal relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic or whatever. The relationship is built on the oopses, how that person responds to a problem. And this is no different. When a customer has a problem and you go above and beyond to resolve it, you're sending them the message that they're important to you. And that builds loyalty. That's how you build an empire instead of a
Exactly.
tiny little.
Right. So Jerry, so what is the secret? We know one of the secret sauces is that good customer service. I mean, that applies to everybody, but kind of dig deeper. We talked earlier before we started recording, what in your mind, what is that aha that if companies would do this, they've got a greater probability of growing bigger, selling more, selling themselves better? What do you see?
Yeah, so great question. So I knew this at some internal level for the majority of my career, but the aha moment came at Apicero. So I was actually brought on there to build and lead their national go-to-market strategy and run sales. But it became clear early on that that wasn't the challenge at those times. Getting MuleSoft sales wasn't super difficult. The challenge was finding the people to do the work because MuleSoft was blowing up and there weren't enough folks who could do it. So it became painfully clear very quickly as myself, the CEO, and then the COO, I was the president, would spend, many a 2 to 3 a.m. hours staring at Google Sheets, deciding who we were going to steal from where to put where else because we'd oversold our delivery again. That we had to recruit, and we had to grow rapidly. And the way that we did that was we broke it into 3 phases: attract, recruit, and retain. But the real thing was the retention. The real thing was the people we got to stay under our banner so we could develop them over time so that we could be confident they'd give above average results to our clients. Said in a shorthand, which is not a gift I have, it's the people. It's always the people. It's the company that you're building that's the secret sauce. You're only as good as your team.
And so retention's real important because so many companies go through hire, 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 and people are constantly turning, and you end up being nothing but a recruitment company. That's
Yes,
not a great place to be. That if you're not measuring turnover, you need to, because turnover gives you all kinds of indicators that there's either something wrong internally, you don't have a good product, you don't have good leadership. There's all kinds of things that turnover tells you that helps you then build your business. Trust me, your customers know it because, again, if I'm working on IT or buying a product, I'm developing a relationship. And if every time I go in there, there's a new person working on this thing and I have to go through the effort to build that trust and relationship again, that's going to get old after a while. And it's like, okay, at some point I'm going to switch companies and go to somebody else.
exactly. And I'll take it one step further, one step beyond that, Dennis. The more complicated your solution, the more critical it is. It's always important, no matter what, no argument. I don't care if you're running an ice cream shop. It's important. But when you've got a complex solution, there's a certain amount of institutional knowledge that you share with your vendor company in order to provide the service. So if that institutional knowledge is perpetually lost, that's time wasted rebuilding it every
Mhm.
time.
Hmm.
And that's a really big deal. I say again, it keeps you from excellence. If every time I engage with your company, I spend the first month rediscovering who you are, that's a month of money of yours that I'm wasting, or profit that I'm losing if I'm not charging you for it. More importantly, if you're coming to me when you've got a problem, that's a month of your time that I'm wasting.
Mm. That
Yep.
that's actually a really interesting point because in talking with a business broker is a friend of mine that I know, and I remember a couple months ago, one of the things that we talked about is a lot of these business owners, and they've run their business for 20, 30 years, and they know how to exactly how it runs. Their names on the outside of the building, and very proud of what they've done. But any type of standard operating procedures really is lost. They maybe have it in a couple notebooks, or maybe it's up in their head, in terms of, oh, this is just easy to do. And it seems to me one of the things that we're not doing as we grow companies is that we're not keeping any type of operations manual or any, like I said, SOPs really placed together in a logical sense and order that we can, when we bring on new employees, that we can share with them. And that really is a big pain point.
Yeah, that's a really relevant tangent and super important, Benny. Less than 15% of companies in the United States ever break $10 million in revenue. And
Mm.
you just pretty much hit the nail on the head as to one of the primary reasons. As the founder, you should be involved in everything in the beginning. But as the company grows, there will come a point where your superpower becomes the kryptonite of your company,
Mm,
where all the things you did that were amazing and epic are now the bottleneck that's holding you back.
wow.
And when you hit that point, you've got to make changes. And it's hard as an owner to let other people deal with your baby because it's your baby. It's
Mm,
also hard to admit that though you are pretty good at it, this person's great at it. And
yeah.
it's a small percentage that can make that turn.
Yeah. No,
And Benny, you hit it on the head too. As new people come in, if you don't have those operating procedures and things that you assume they're going to know or do, it makes them feel inferior, wasted time, and then that's causes them to start looking for another job
yeah,
sooner than ever because
100%.
they don't feel like they're part of the organization, or they get chastised for not
yeah,
doing something correct that they didn't know because nobody bothered to train them. It was just kind of an assumed that you would know all this stuff. And
yeah, yeah.
It
I
it go I'm sorry, it goes beyond the context of today's conversation, but you hit on another important thing I'd love to talk about another time, and that's that how you bring a person into your organization largely plots their trajectory from day one, whether
mm,
it's up or down. So, topic for another day, but important one.
no,
yeah,
that's
we'll
good.
definitely have you back for that one because I think that's one that I think people forget about. And we're really right now, this one secret sauce is the retention, but I think the other one is how do you onboard them? And we'll
Yeah.
Frankly, that feeds retention or not, you know?
exactly. It all ties in. It all plays in there. So
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll make a comment here, and then I do have a question on kind of follows up what you were saying, but the ability to really understand, and I think even the bigger we go in terms of companies, people kind of lose the fact that you want to really work to keep your employees and let them feel a deal of joy, in work, right? I mean,
Yes.
if they don't have pride in who they work for, if they don't have pride in their job, they're not going to just stay put. They're going to they're going to move on. And it's funny, Dennis, what you were saying in terms of like, oh, you should just know how this works. Yeah, I have a very close family relative of mine who she's chastised from time to time for not knowing that you should do something. And it was never ever explained to her that you should do it. Looking through all the documents, never explained. Oh, you should just know how to do that. That's the silliest and goofiest thing I've ever heard. But I mean, to that,
Leadership problem.
yes, yeah, yes, I will. We'll talk about this because this is an on-developing thing. But at some point, we'll with this particular individual, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Gerry, in terms of we as business owners, and we're you've been able to grab that golden ring, right? And the dream that we all have, being able to give an exit that really is our dream. A lot of times, I talk to business owners, and Dennis and I have had this conversation over and over. They have this overblown idea of what their business is worth. It's worth X amount of millions of dollars. And here's the reason I believe, and if we look at it objectively, it's not even close. And people get, they get angry, they get upset, and, frankly, they'll get hurt because of that. But why is it that the way we look at our businesses as business owners and really the true value of our business, why are we so disconnected a lot of times?
Easy answer, surprisingly very easy answer. It's the same way with our children. When we look at our children, we see, absolute amazing human beings, and other people are like, 5 out of 10. You know? It's because you're in
Except
love with it.
mine's he's
Obvious,
awesome.
clearly,
Yeah.
Ben, clearly. So the answer is that you've poured so much of your blood, sweat, and tears into this entity. Your self-worth and ego require a return on that,
Mm,
so that the world acknowledges you. And
mm,
that's what's happening is these owners are tying their self-worth to the valuation of their company,
mm,
which you don't need to be a Harvard psychiatrist to realize is probably not a healthy path. But that's the why of it. And interestingly, the ones that typically are hurt the most are the ones that have made the company the most about them. They're the ones that haven't let go of anything. They're the ones that are involved in every single decision. They're the ones that are the face of the company still, the ones that are in every sales call. And all those things might sound good on one level, but the message that sends to your buyer is, when you leave, I don't have a company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to the employees, they end up being just robots and not making
Yes.
decisions because they know they have to wait for Benny to make that decision because that's how Benny's done it all these years. That Benny, is the control and wants to have all the answers. And so, and I'm sure that leads to turnover
Does.
because at some point you want to feel valued and like you've got ownership in the process. And if all you're doing is just being kind of a robot, it's not real rewarding. And if you can find a place to jump off, and in today's world with Glassdoor and LinkedIn and all this stuff, you can definitely be shopping and looking at what's out there in the marketplace
And
and
most
jump.
are.
And most
Yes.
are exactly. It's like okay, and on there you can find out what's the management like. And I tell people if you're when you're doing interviews, don't just be selling yourself, but be looking at the culture. Are you a good fit? Do you like the way that they work? Ask lots of questions because you owe it to the company to try to be there to stay there as long as you can as well. And you need to do some stuff on the front end as the potential employee.
I could spend 2 hours unpacking what you just said, but let me make 2 points and I'll walk away from it. The first is this: one of the things that I work with all my clients on is what we call EFG leadership: engage, fulfill, and grow. The short version of it is, if an employee feels heard and valued, they enjoy what they do most of the time. It's a job. Not everything's ever going to be great, but most of the time they dig what you're doing and they're in alignment with what you're doing and they're growing in their skills, then you're incentivizing them to stay with you long term. If any one of those three things breaks, then they're on their way out. In a healthy company, the thing that breaks will be the G. Their growth exceeds your ability to allow them to grow, so they leave. And when that happens, and it will happen often, that's what I call healthy churn. When they leave for that reason, they should be, they should be patted on the back and thanked and let go with grace, because you're sending an ambassador out to the world. Talk about that more another time. But the other part that you talked about there, Dennis, about them asking questions, an interview is not an interrogation. They might both start with I, but there's different letters in there for a reason. An interview is a conversation. As a candidate, especially the more senior you get, as a candidate, it's your responsibility to do your half of deciding if this is a good match. I've been in this game for 30 years, and I can say with the authority of that time that there are far more bad matches than there are bad companies and bad candidates.
Mm.
50% of that is the company. The other 50 is you, the candidate. If you're just sitting there like a convict with a detective flashing a light in your face and not asking any questions back, that's on you if it's a bad match.
Yeah, I
It's
agree. I
interesting.
mean, yeah, again, if you're looking for a job, ask lots of questions. I mean,
Yes.
ask to go spend a day with a person that's in the role. And if they won't let you, that's a good flag that that's probably not a good place to work. Because if I'm a manager and you ask that, it's like, hey, that's pretty cool that they want to make sure they're a good fit. That's giving me a green flag that they're probably going to be a good commitment once if I decide to hire them.
Yeah, I often get asked what a good culture is, and it's a good question. I understand why people ask it, but the better question is, what's a good culture for this person at this stage in their career?
Right.
Because my great culture might be toxic to you, and the inverse is also true. It's
Mhm.
Correct.
about matching values and where they are and what they're trying to accomplish in their personal missions.
And especially since we've gone through COVID and the whole work from home, back in the office, those are all kinds of conversations you need to have, especially if you're in tech, because tech people like to kind of hunker down. Working from home's probably a positive thing for them in many cases, and so it's understanding what's that culture like, what's that going to be, where. But again, if I'm working from home, how do I still have that culture? How do I have that connections? Because there's some negatives from working from home that we've talked
Yes.
about before. So it's like, okay, how do you find those mix and matches that fit your scenario the best possible way to
Mhm.
allow you to be productive and give back? So, as we're talking, Gerry, is, there's lots of secret sauces here that we're hearing, but the one today was more around that retention piece. Um, as an employer, you know, you're going to still have some turn over time. What's
And
kind
that's
of
not bad.
Now, I was gonna say that's not bad. I mean, because there's some people that somehow get in there, they change, you change, whatever. So it's good to churn. They grow. I mean, I like the one where you just can't provide them the position anymore, and it's actually a good thing because they become an ambassador for your organization. You may actually be able to do work with each other because they go somewhere else and
100%.
pull you in. So those are good things to celebrate. But as you look at this, is there a number of percent on turnover that people should is there a red flag, or is it vary by company? What's your experience on that?
Yeah, that's a harder question to answer because it varies with a couple of primary variables. The first one being where you are in your organization's growth. So, for example, and this folds into my EFG methodology, but for example, when your company grows and it transitions from startup phase, head on fire, crazy time, to a more staid organization that's developing SOPs, and then further on down the line, an organization that has defined systems and processes, defined job descriptions, and things done a certain way. The people in those phases may well be different. So, for example, I'm not a big company guy. I have nothing against big business, nothing against big companies. I just don't enjoy the atmosphere in working there. When Apicero broke 1,000 employees, I wasn't happy anymore. I was pretty unhappy. I didn't like it. We hit 2,500. I was hunting for an exit. It's
Hmm.
just not me. Again, not a bad thing, just not a me thing. So churn is going to change as you hit transition points, and it will rocket up and come back down. The second thing is the type of employee. There are certain categories of employees that churn more. Salespeople, for example, versus
Mm.
accountants. Accountants don't move, salespeople don't stay put. It's just the nature of the personality in that place. Now, obviously, there are outliers. But the main thing when you're looking at churn is the reason for it. Okay. So if the churn is occurring because of employee dissatisfaction, if it appears to be a television program and it's a drama, that's bad churn. Okay. If it's people leaving because of the need to continue to grow, that's not necessarily bad churn. Often it can be quite good. Again, if it's below a certain amount. But if I was to say to gun to head force me to an answer, I'd say more than 10% of a 100-person company is problematic.
Okay. And I think I'm guessing there's companies out there that have more than 10%. So
Yes.
that's the red flag that says, hey, you really ought to
Mhm.
dig into this and start asking and doing some research to figure out what's going on because it's probably impacting your business.
Yes.
Jerry, there's been so much great information and just stuff here. I was seriously taking notes. But what would you say? If there's anything else you want to close this out, what would you kind of let the audience know? Any advice or anything that you want to leave them with?
No, that's great. We've talked a lot about retention, which is critical, but just remember retention is one of the three phases of building your company. There's the attraction phase, the recruitment phase, and the retention phase. I like to talk about retention because it's the most neglected, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But what all of that comes down to is building an exceptional team that stays with you for an extended period of time so you can give the most value to your clients and your customers. And retention again is a piece of that, but it's in service to building that exceptional team. That, if anything, is what the secret sauce is.
That's fantastic. Yeah, in a lot of people will take away from this that information is they've heard it before, but a lot of the blocking and the tackling, a lot of the basics. I hate to hear people say that. Oh, I wanted that magic potion, but no, the truth of it is this all kind of evolves up into that. And I think that's a great thing. And because of that, Jerry, I know people are going to have questions for you. They're going to have some things that we didn't cover here. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to reach out to
Sure, I'm embarrassingly active on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. On my website, destinationemployer.co, there's scheduling links if you want to talk to me directly there. Uh, if you want to learn more about what we talked about, everything I talked about today came from my book, Destination Employer, which you can see on Amazon. So I'm not a hard person to find. If you can't find me, you're not
Exactly. And I encourage you
you?
guys to look. I mean, he's a
Mm-hmm.
great conversation, great insight. And I've been on Jerry's podcast. Jerry, what's your podcast called? Share that.
Probably not surprising given our topic, but business mastery for startup scale-ups and early stage businesses.
There you go. So
Fantastic.
another podcast, if you don't have it on your list, add that one to your list.
Definitely give it a listen. Thank you, Gerry. I appreciate Dennis and I, can't thank you enough for stopping by and spending some time with us and sharing your drops of wisdom with us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on such a great show.
Thanks so much. We'll see
Thanks
you
so
next time.
much. Take care, guys.
Okay.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.